majority of the cars in our collection really date from the 1950s to the 1970s, with a few leaking in the 80s and beyond. However, this car, believe it or not, is a 2005 Morgan Aero 8. I'm Alex Haugland.
And I'm Amy Haugland.
And this is Everyday to Exotic. Join us as we share some of the unique vehicles in our diverse collection of exotic and everyday cars.
Driving each car provides a different experience, each with their individual strengths and weaknesses.
We'll take you through those characteristics together, both up close in the studio and while driving them on the beautiful roads of Oregon.
Finally, we'll individually award points for each episode's car to determine where it ranks in the Haugland Collection.
This is Everyday to Exotic.
Yay! Sorry, did I yay too soon?
No, that was great.
Hey yo, yeah, I'm popping out the pan. Keeping up with me, you gonna need a better plan. Think we enemies, but I don't even know you, man. Miss me with that bit before I feed you to the stands.
The Morgan Motor Company began building vehicles in Malvern, United Kingdom in 1909, starting with three-wheeled cars and then four-wheeled cars from 1936 onwards. The company is still going today, having been owned entirely within the Morgan family until recently. They built all their cars by hand over 100 years later, mostly to order.
That said, the majority of their cars followed the same design principles and construction, with wood-frame bodies, sliding pillar front suspension, and a strict adherence to tradition. Tradition! This, the Morgan Aero 8, was a significant break from that tradition. With a body that is mostly bonded and riveted aluminum, or aluminium as they would say it, more modern, fully independent suspension, and a significantly more modern body style, while still maintaining the key elements of the Morgan design DNA.
To give an idea of how set in tradition Morgan has been, this car was the first significantly new design the company had produced since 1964. The goal was to build something revolutionary for the brand and approach supercar performance of the time, while preserving what makes a Morgan a Morgan.
The end result was a car that weighs about 2,500 pounds, 700 pounds less than a contemporary Ferrari, and can go 0 to 62 miles per hour in 4.8 seconds with a top speed of 160 miles an hour. This car is the second version, which was made from 2004 to 2005, primarily to meet the American car safety and emission standards. It's one of approximately 60 produced before the third series, few of which came to the US, and before the need for side airbags ended US sales in 2007.
Let's go.
So the body of an Aero 8 is made entirely of aluminum and composite materials, and Morgan ended up doing that in order to keep the weight down. Some parts like the fenders and things were stamped ahead of time by machines, but everything was assembled and put together by hand. We've actually toured the Morgan factory in the past and got to see them building Aero 8s, and everything truly is done very much in a hand-built process. The body's on a cart, they roll it around on the cart, people attach things by hand, they put it together, they screw it together, they glue it together, they rivet it together, build the whole car.
Because these cars are made to order, you can give Morgan any paint color from any manufacturer and they'll match it. The one problem with that is if you're the second owner like we are, we have no idea what color this is. We just better not ever bump the paintwork because matching that is just gonna be a pain.
So that said, a lot of elements are really traditional to Morgans, even on a car like this. There's a hinge here in the middle, and the bonnet opens from each side, so you open one side at a time. The fenders are these sweeping fenders that are shaped very much like they are in the classic Morgans. A lot of those details tend to be the same. Almost every Morgan's convertible, so is this.
One of the echoes to tradition is this front grille. That front grille has been the same on Morgan since like the 1950s. The thing about this one though is that's not functional. It's closed off. It doesn't go through. The real grille on this car is on the bottom. So why have that? Tradition. Also, it looks cool.
TM.
The headlights are off of a modern Volkswagen Beetle, but they're mounted in the opposite way to how they would be mounted on a modern Volkswagen. So it gives the car a slightly cross-eyed look.
Later on the later versions of this car, they switched those over to mini headlights. From what I was reading, BMW actually had designed the new mini headlight and could have theoretically let Morgan use it, but they really didn't want to have their brand new headlight design appear on some other car before the Mini.
So that brings us to the rear of the car. You may notice that the lights look a little odd. You've got your usual brake lights on the outside. The single reverse light can be a little bit confusing to Americans, as can the fog light. That is not something that you usually see on American cars, only on European, which is a little odd since this car was made specifically for the American market.
One of the options that you could actually pick on this as a Morgan is having your exhaust not exit out the back, but exit out the side. And so there's an exhaust pipe on either side that comes out. The sound of it is amazing. I don't know why it wasn't standard. I would have definitely done it as a standard feature to all of them, and all of them really should have it.
One of the issues, unfortunately, with those wonderful side pipes is that, covered or not, I have managed to burn myself on it getting out of the car. These are short people problems.
The wheels are much, much larger than what you would typically see on a Morgan, much lower profile tires, much wider tires than you typically would see. But that's just to match the engine and the power that this generates. So one of the things that almost every sports car manufacturer today does when they give you information about their car is tell you how many sets of golf clubs you can fit in the trunk.
We don't care about golf. No offense to our golfing viewers.
So for us, we found a far, far more useful and important metric, especially living here in Oregon, which is how many cases of wine you can fit in the trunk. We found you can fit 3. So moving to the engine and drivetrain, what you have is a BMW-sourced power plant, which is a 4.4-liter V8.
Clocked out, 10 till 2, beat the traffic on the way down.
It completely fills the engine bay, makes it almost impossible to work in here. There's no security on the engine bay. You just push the latches, pull it open, and lift it up. It's kind of a pain. And of course, you have to work on the other side. You have to go open the other side and close this one. The other advantage is, being a BMW engine, it's a very, very reliable. Other than maintenance, there's not really much you actually have to do under here most of the time. So it's not that bad that it's such a pain to get to. The engine produces 333 horsepower and 331 pound-feet of torque, which for a car that weighs 2,500 pounds actually gets it moving pretty quickly. It gets power to the rear wheels through a 6-speed gearbox, manual transmission, sourced also from BMW. The suspension on the back is fully independent, unlike most other Morgans before this, which all had a solid rear axle. Front suspension on Morgans since 1909 have been a sliding pillar suspension system. It worked really well for 1909. Compared to almost every modern suspension system, it's really pretty primitive. It's actually part of the character of what makes most Morgans a Morgan, but it also makes them not necessarily the nicest car to drive at really, really high speeds. This went to a much more modern suspension with A-arms, fully independent, and handles actually much, much better than the older Morgans. That said, one of the really unusual features about it is that Morgan did that without incorporating any sway bars, which pretty much every other modern car happens to still have.
Making my back just to get off the ground. Think I'm running out of chances. Beating up time just to slow it down. I need a key.
All right, time for the interior.
I need a place to clear my mind. I need a key. I need a West Coast sunset paradise.
Because every Morgan was made to order, everything about the interior is bespoke, from the color of the leather, to the carpet, to this beautiful coordinating trim, to the type of wood. The dash is machined metal, but the framing is wood. That reminds you, you're in a Morgan. All of the important gauges are in front of the driver. The one gauge that is not in front of the driver is the clock. It's way over here. The driver literally cannot see it. But that's okay, because in most of the British cars we own, the clock doesn't work anyway. Radio's modern. This comes with a lot of very modern features, including cruise control, air conditioning that actually works, and a nice glove box so that I can put my knitting in there. side windows, little and electric side windows, are a new thing for Morgan in this model. Most Morgans up to this point had side curtains that you had to attach and detach when you took the top down. Speaking of the top is very easy to put up and take down. It's not electric. It's done by hand, but it's super, super easy and it latches to the top here. Most of the controls are push button, including the start. That can get a little confusing for me sometimes because I'm used to cranking the key. Unlike many cars of this era and before, this car doesn't have any defroster vents and it doesn't have any room for them. To solve this issue, Morgan put tiny little wires in the windscreen itself instead. Because the windscreen is so wide side to side but so narrow from the top to the bottom, Morgan put in 3 shorter windshield wipers rather than the usual 2.
Right, let's take it for a spin.
Let's roll.
This is really Morgan's attempt at building kind of a supercar. So the goal was really to kind of update their design and build something much, much more modern than what they'd historically done, while still keeping their general DNA of what makes a Morgan a Morgan. In general, this is a pretty comfortable car. I mean, it goes over bumps better than a regular Morgan. The suspension is still pretty stiff. It corners pretty flat, but you do feel the road. You feel a little bit more of just the vibrations of the road surface itself than you would in necessarily a lot of other cars. But it drives like a sports car. That said, it doesn't have things like traction control. It does have anti-lock brakes, it does have airbags, it has the things that it was required to have by code. It even has a tire pressure monitor system. But in general, it's as simple as they can make it. It's unlike most other sports cars. It's a little bit of a flexible body and flexible chassis, but it's designed to do that, and Morgans historically have always done that. And that's part of what gives them the suspension and feel that they have.
Does the Morgan still have a wood frame?
It has wood in the body of the car, and some of the things I believe are still framed in wood, like the doors. But really, this is a departure from the way Morgan used to build cars. But this car is primarily riveted bonded aluminum, so much more of a modern aircraft type production method, except they're still built almost entirely by hand. So there's some composites in this too and other materials, but generally it's riveted bonded aluminum for the majority of it. So it keeps the weight down. I mean, that's part of the great thing about this car as far as performance, is it just doesn't weigh very much for a car of its era. Most supercars of the early 2000s or whatever are like 3,500 pound cars. When you actually look at it, they're kind of porky. One of the things I love about touring this part of Oregon is Lane County has some of the best covered bridges anywhere in the U.S., and more of them than almost anywhere.
Yeah, I know I'm fully attracted. I'm hanging on like a fridge to a magnet.
Love that noise.
Yeah, fantastic exhaust note. Drivetrain's pretty much all BMW. I mean, there's been some tuning done by Morgan specifically to tune it for these cars. I think it's actually a little bit higher performance than the typical BMW application. But at the same time, it is just a very, very reliable, really, really good, high-performing car.
And we have taken this on long road trips, and it's been perfectly comfortable.
Yeah, we've taken it all the way down the Oregon coast, all the way into California, down to Monterey for Classic Car Week. We've driven it through the Redwoods, which was a fantastic drive with the top down, especially in the evening when we hit it. But it's also great in Oregon. I mean, this is one of my favorite cars to take to wineries and take out on events like that, just because it drives like a modern car, it runs like a modern car, it's got power steering, it's comfortable to handle and drive.
But it looks like a classic car. You get a lot of people asking, what is that?
Yeah, it's another one where it looks like nothing else on the road.
You and me, we go good together. You and I go good together. You and I, we go good together.
So, this is my very first time driving this vehicle. I'm a little bit, Alex is checking me, making sure that I'm centered. I'm pretty sure I'm centered here. Anyway, I feel fairly comfortable. It's a very modern car. I feel very comfortable with the controls. I'm not worried about doing anything weird with it. The one thing I do not like is I do not like that I cannot see the front of the car.
Because you're too short.
Because I'm too short. Well, that is true. But also, you've said that even when you're sitting here, you can't see all the way to the front of the car.
No, the nose curves down.
Yes.
You can't really tell no matter what.
And I like being able to see that. This car has intimidated me for a long time, partially for that reason. I'm intimidated by cars with long noses. But the gearbox is really nice. I'm just cruising along in second gear here. It drives more nicely than my Evora, which is really cool. I tend to get a little bit anxious. This is Amy's driving style. I have this image in my head that the car is much wider than it actually is. And so I'm terrified of hitting mailboxes. I'm not going to hit any mailboxes.
You're doing just fine.
Yep. And right now I'm I would drive this car again.
You can go to third gear.
Oh, I could go to third gear. Check that out. Successfully shifted to third gear. It's a very precise shifter too. It's there's no shilly-shallying around. Some older cars, it's put the stick shift vaguely here. And if it grinds, you're not there.
Yeah, this shifts pretty precisely. It's a pretty short throw too.
Yeah.
So, if anything, that's the main trick is just figuring out, okay, did I hit third or did I hit fifth?
Yes.
Part of the nature of learning to drive a car.
Yep.
Is getting used to it. I think that you're having a little bit of an issue still pushing the clutch in.
Yes. Okay, so just to be clear, in order for me to push the clutch all the way in, I have to push it in with my tippy toes.
And the seat's all the way forward.
Yes. Short people problems. I love the noise it makes, though. You hit the accelerator even just a little bit, and it makes just the most beautiful purring sound.
It'd also be fun to just kind of tap it a bit, just get sort of that rup.
It's lovely. All right, we're back in the studio. Time for the Haugland Score.
Here's how it works.
Alex and I have individually rated the car in 5 categories, each with a rank of 0 to 10. Then we add our scores together to give us the final Haugland Score.
After we combine our scores, the results go up on the board. So, first category is performance, the raw driving ability of the car. So, I gave this a 9. Overall, it's actually a pretty impressive car. It handles very, very well. It has great acceleration, amazing sound, just kind of everything you want in a good high-performance sports car.
And I gave it an 8, which is pretty impressive to me considering it was my very first time driving the car. I thought that the acceleration in particular was really lovely, and it was very smooth. I felt very in control. Our next category is style. I gave the car an 8. I love the classic lines, I love the custom color, and I love how the coordinating piping and details like that pull, again, the exterior into the interior.
I also gave it an 8. It looks like an exotic car. It does not look like the typical car you would ever see on the road. That to me is actually really an attractive thing. I couldn't really easily go higher without dealing with sort of the cross-eyed look and some of the other sort of oddities that it has. But overall, I actually like the styling. It looks better in person than I think it does in pictures and on film.
I agree.
So we've got drivability, which is really how easily can you use this car as day-to-day transportation. I ended up actually giving it a 4. It has a very small gas tank, honestly, and so I feel like I'm constantly filling it up. It's not really a car that I feel that I could easily hop in and drive absolutely anywhere I wanted to go.
I feel really generous now. I gave it a 6. Because I feel like the trunk is large enough. I could take it grocery shopping, for instance. I would still park it like way in the back of the parking lot away from everybody else. But I have to extend my foot completely in order to get the clutch to the floor, and that is not comfortable, especially if you're driving long distances. I can't see the end of the nose, partially because I'm too short and partially because you can't. And so I would be nervous about doing everyday things like parking it. Our next category is significance. This is not just the significance of the car to the automotive world in general, but also its significance to our collection in particular. I gave it an 8. This is a rare car. They didn't import very many organs. They didn't import very many organs. Okay. Morgans to Oregon. That's what.
Morgans, period.
Yes.
They didn't import that many Morgans.
To the United States.
Into the United States.
Yes.
I also gave it an 8, and for a lot of the same reasons. It's not a very common car to see. I like Morgans in general, but this is actually a very usable car for a Morgan. It really is a major change for the company itself, showing that a company that's basically been around at that point for about 100 years could actually come out with something very new, very different, and kind of change who they are, but without really getting rid of what made them who they are. Our last category is delight. This really is less about our experience with the car and more about how other people react to it, how it sparks joy amongst those around it. I gave this a 7. And some of that actually kind of came off of this drive. During one part of the drive, we had someone else near us driving a DeLorean. And people completely ignored the Morgan. It didn't really inspire the attention-grabbing delight that it would otherwise. That said, other people really do gravitate towards it and see it as something unusual.
I gave it a 9 because everywhere we go with the Morgan, especially when we don't have a DeLorean near us,
fair enough.
We get a lot of requests for photos. There's a ton of interaction, people asking, what's that car? And giving us thumbs up as we're driving along. So I felt like it deserved a 9. People love it.
So, now that we've added everything up, that gives us a grand total score of 75 for our 2005 Morgan Aero 8.
That puts it in 3rd place, just 1 point below the 1972 Datsun 240Z.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Thank you for watching this episode of Everyday to Exotic.
Our goal is to create a show that's as much fun for you to watch as it is for us to make.
So please comment. Let us know what you liked and what you'd like to see.
Don't forget to subscribe. We're creating new content all the time, and we're looking forward to bringing it to you. You'll want to be among the first to know.
And if you have friends who you think would enjoy this, please go ahead and share it with them.
Don't forget to like.
And if you want to see what else is going on with the Haugland Collection, follow us on Instagram at Haugland Collection. We'll see you on the next episode of Everyday to Exotic.
Okay, see you later. Bye.
Keeping you from having yourself some fun, baby.
Oh, baby.
Yeah. But you